Hey, good morning, folks out there, wherever you are listening. It is time. If you've ever wondered what it takes to achieve remarkable success, to overcome obstacles, and transform your performance in the face of big change, then you are in the right place.
You are welcome to Performance Shift, the show that will take you on a journey of discovery, exploration, and transformation, and give you the tools to navigate your own moments of change.
And my name's John Register, a two-time Paralympic athlete, Army combat veteran, and an author.
And I'm Kat Koppett, an organizational consultant, author, and improviser.
And together we are sharing our expertise and insights into navigating change and finding success in the face of adversity.
We are live here some Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can also catch us asynchronously on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn.
And if you've been enjoying these episodes, please select the notification bell and share it with a friend. We're having wonderful conversations. We are in a season of talking about the power of story. And today we are really focusing on this power of the story gaps that we have. And I think, what do we mean by story gaps?
That's a good question, John. You and I were just having a conversation about what do we actually mean when we're talking about story gaps. And I think we're talking about a number of things.
Yes.
One is the stories that we as speakers and leaders miss out on telling. In some ways, that's the simplest level of it. But we're also talking about who isn't getting the opportunity to share their stories, whose stories need to be amplified and elevated in ways that they're not right now, and what can we do about that as leaders. And then at a third level, I think we're talking about what are the ambient narratives or the stories that we're swimming in all the time that need to be investigated, interrogated, and what are the new stories that we might want to be telling collectively as opposed to just accepting the old ones.
So when we talk about the stories we aren't telling, those ones, what are the stories that we're not taking advantage of? I mean, when I think about this, I think about these. A lot of times I'll go in front of a group, like maybe technical audiences, doing fantastic work in the tech field. And a lot of times they're telling data-driven stories. A lot of data points. Here's the how we do the system, the sequence, the process. But we're not sharing a narrative on why those systems, sequences, and processes are important and who they're important for, and where they're supposed to go, and who came up with the idea, and how do we get to this point. And I think those things are really critical to sharing and actually selling an idea, or selling your talent, your time, your vision to leadership, or to your team members, or to even your maybe some subordinates that you have, so that everybody can move that needle forward. Love to know your thoughts.
Well, I think you're spot on. The Alan Alda Institute, works with improv and story with scientists, because they're like, we have these brilliant minds doing this incredible work, but if you can't communicate it, then that isn't going to be the story that's out there. People won't understand what you're doing, and then they won't value it. I also work a lot with engineers, and we do a lot of sort of building influence programs with them. And this is at the heart of it. It's not just for me. Everything you said is true, right? Like, what does this mean for you? Why should you care? All of that. But at an even more fundamental level, sometimes people need to be walked through the meaning of the data. A lot of the things that engineers say to us is, when we start, is, well, I shouldn't have to influence. The best idea should just win, or the data just, tells you what you should know, and that's fact. And in fact, it's not, right? So you have a statistic, or you have information that still needs to be interpreted. And the way you're interpreting it with your experience may be different from how a civilian would interpret it, or even just someone, with different experience. So recognizing that you need to be actively choosing the story that you want to tell and being able to articulate it as part of the skill.
What came up for me when you were sharing that is I was on a board of advisors for a young startup company, and they were just like that. They were not so. It's a tech company, but they're attorneys, and so they're good at telling if you're in a courtroom to tell stories and how to make your narrative shift. But they were only talking about the data points because they had a small window of time for their rounds of funding to get in front of a group of decision makers to get revenue for their startup. But I was attracted to them because of their story. These two amazing women who were not able to advance even after graduating the University of Texas, going to Harvard Law School, and brilliant minds, but they decided they wanted to have a family. And that field just said, no, you got to either choose to be in the corporate lifestyle or you need to leave. It was basically, so they chose to form their own company around, of course, just DEI. And because they didn't think that was equitable or fair, that they had to choose like that. So that's what they formed. And I said, that's a powerful narrative of why you got into this. And I think that story, let's lead with that, even if it's only for a minute, 90 seconds of this, to set the stage for why you're doing this work and then give the data points. They started winning funding rounds like it wasn't, it was, they didn't win them all, but they were starting to win a lot of them because of
Yeah.
the story. Yeah.
I love that example, right? It's two different kinds of storytelling is one way to think about it, right? Like one story we have to tell is here's the data. This isn't just a one-off anecdote, right? It's not just anecdotal evidence of me, myself. It's ubiquitous. Here's why it matters. Here's the trends. Right? That's an important story. But it's also important, the story of like, who are you and why should I trust you? And what's an example of an individual that this matters to, right? Like those are stories that don't necessarily get told, even if we're doing a good job of telling the story of these trends or data that we're sharing, right?
Have you been in a situation where, you want to get your story out, but it just wasn't being heard?
Well, I think a lot of us are in that situation, and it's sort of that next level of story gap that we've talked about, right? I think anytime we are outside of the mainstream in a context, there's a good chance that our story won't be heard or valued.
Mhm.
So the example that I'm thinking of right now is when I was at summer camp near you in Estes Park in Colorado.
Yeah.
And I loved camp. I loved riding horses. I loved the hiking. But there was I was this little Jewish kid. I think I was one of two Jewish kids in the entire camp in the 1970s. And the assumptions that were made about, there was a camp counselor. I've never really told this story, but there was a activities, sort of like the cruise director of the camp. And she kept trying to include me, but she never really asked me, like, what are you interested in? Or how are you feeling? And the moment that I remember most clearly was there was a touring production of the musical Godspell that was coming through that did a performance at our camp. And I'm a musical theater kid and I love musicals and I knew all the music from Godspell. It's a great show. I was super excited. But she came up to me before the performance and she said, if you don't want to come to the performance because the musical is about the life of Jesus, then you can sit it out. You don't have to come. And I thought, wow, there's so many interesting stories you're making up in your head that are not actually my story. So I'm sure it's happened in professional settings as a woman and a leader, an external person, but that's the one that came to mind just now when you were.
Yeah, I asked that because, we do have so many stories that we want to get out, and I'm kind of juxtaposing it to what we're listening for, what
Mhm.
we're hearing, and are we too quick to share or talk um, without, getting all the data, all the facts, all the things that we would need to have a maybe a different story or a better narrative, or to align the story better. I think, a lot of times when I was trying to present ideas, uh, I was coming from a standpoint of like a military background,
Mhm.
and my narrative in the military background was, it's not really, it's kind of like a meritocracy, right? It's you elevate based upon a series of schools that you go to, or opportunities that you have succeeded in, and then you just kind of naturally, you just kind of go on up, and you're with your peer group, and you keep on rising. But that's not the same in the corporate space. What I found out, not quickly, but it took me a little while, years it took me to understand this, is that just because you have a great idea and you articulate that idea, kind of like you said earlier, doesn't really rise as a meritocracy. It has to be vetted against all these other things that are pressing against it, or trying to elevate it or push it away because somebody else wants that slot that's above you, and everybody's kind of fighting for these things. So we're really in a competition for it. And I think those are some narratives that often get uh, lost in how we show up with our own story and trying to get them out, um, and being able to share our, uh, who gets to share their opportunity with their story.
Oh, yes, I think that resonates for me. What I make up when you talk about that is it's not that there aren't politics in the military, I'm sure there are,
Right.
but the rules seem clearer, right? Like the goals and the rules and the paths
Mhm.
of all of that are, I make up, sort of easier to articulate and discern than in any individual company. It may be a little more opaque or something that you sort of have to figure out, like, wait, how do people get
Right.
promoted here? What is valued? Whose stories are listened to, right?
Right. Yeah. And like, when I'm looking at this, I look at like decision makers. Maybe it's the frontline employee, the one that's the latch, open the door up in the morning, because they're the first ones that interact with a customer or see something that's going wrong in the building, or oh, we got a leaky pipe today, and that has to get out because that might impact sales later on.
Mhm.
Or it's diverse talent that's there, so this talent's been hired, but sometimes talent is hired because maybe filling a quota or something, and now other people feel that that voice is no longer valued because, oh, you got here not because of your merits, but because of someone gave you this position. So now your story is not even heard because that's a story they're telling themselves in their own mind. In actuality, they were in a competition. They were never in a competition, but they got access to competition. When they got access to competition, they actually accelerated over the other individual who now thinks that they got that job because of the opportunity.
Well, it's a deeply right, I mean, that's a great example, I think, of a story gap, right? Of an
Right,
ambient narrative that we have that then where we need to shift that, which is if you are different from the standard, typical, mainstream community here, you got your role because of unfair advantage, whatever
right,
that is, right?
right,
Quota, whatever. When in fact, right, um, the a story that we could tell with data is equally or more qualified people don't even get an interview often
right,
if they
right.
don't fit, if they're not a fit in that sort of mainstream way. Certainly historically that's been true, and it
Yeah,
continues to be true in various ways, right?
yeah,
So that's a great example, and part of the reason that I think exists is because the stories that we are hearing, right? We work with our folks and we have our life experience and we talk to people like us. And so we think our story is the truth.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I have like even a trip that's coming up. I know you're going international. I'm going international pretty soon here. And one of the narratives that comes up in story working with this company group I'm working with is oftentimes Americans will go in with the solutions without understanding the true problem of what's going on, or even acknowledging that there have been solutions that the country or the entity or the group has been working on before, you know, kind of us coming in and showing up.
Mm.
So I've taken that and as a strategy to ask before I even show up, or even if I'm in a room and I'm asking my opinion on something, is to say, well, tell me what's been working for you. What have I see that you have this success over here. Tell me more about that.
Right.
Because that's really, that might not be a model that works in the United States, but it works here. I'm trying to think of an example of, well, one example is there's a narrative out there about the broadcast that will happen for the Paralympic Games and actually for the Paralympic Games. So we have more broadcasts, which is fantastic, by NBC that's going to be doing this. It's really a lot of television coverage for broadcast coverage for Paralympic Games, which is amazing. What was happening is the narrative in other countries was that we in the United States really just didn't care about putting Paralympic athletes on television. But the reality was, and is still, that governments around the world put those games on and they subsidize it by their tax structure or whatever, and they turn it on the news in a very smaller country than the United States. So it's easier for them to do it on their public channels that they have. While in America, we have to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to sell. You got to earn your right to be on television. And if no one even understands what your story is, how are you going to compete with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Soccer, hockey is starting up, baseball's finishing up, or just starting, World Series, and we got NFL football season start. All these things are competing, and oh, by the way, on ESPN2, you got poker that everybody wants to watch. So you have all these competing interests, and so we have to be able to share and tell that narrative that it's a very different model that is happening here than over someplace else.
You're highlighting the story gap that we're talking about of like who has access to telling their stories, right? So we started by saying, I'm speaking, am I being sure that I'm telling the stories that I want to tell or that are going to be the most impactful? What am I leaving out? And then we sort of shifted to blocks to that. And now we're talking about like who is one of the blocks is not even having access to be able to start to tell your story. And so I guess my question back is in that context, for example, what do you do about that? We have all of this competition. There's all this noise out there. How do I, as a leader or as an individual, how do I get my story out?
Yeah, I think it's, and I'm not sure if I'll have the right answer, or if there's even a right answer to it. I think there's just different strategies. The way I think about it is trying to get to those who are the decision makers, to find the person that will hear the story and then empathize with the story. So we see it from my viewpoint, and I can see it from their viewpoint as well. And then begin the process of, okay, what do we do with building what Dr. Harry Edwards, a sociologist, would call a pervasive demand. And the pervasive demand is other people that can tell that story, that latch onto it, that can expand that story. I just heard a person, I hope this connects. His name's Arel Moody. He built out, and he and Pokin, his assistant, built out a company called Talkadot. And so it's a way for anybody that wants to get immediate feedback from their audience to do this through an application, a online survey, which they can do right in the middle of their presentation. And I think it's one of the best things that have come out. And during this time of as the REL was working on this, I've been trying to share this narrative of these data points that are really significant, because I think people don't want, and when I say people, I'm talking about professional like speakers. Some really want the data, right? They want the data to tell a great story,
right,
to close the gap of and make an equal playing field, because you have data of an audience member who's writing testimonials about what you did in the moment in that professional speech.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I have taken from him is he said to anytime that you're trying to tell that story and you want to reach a decision maker, you can go on LinkedIn and whoever the company is, and just start beginning to connect with a few of their people in the company, so that when your proposal goes forward or your request goes forward and they start checking you out, they see that a few people have already connected with you. And I think that's a good way to get your story in front of the right person, right? So that's like a little strategy there to do that.
Yeah. So it gives you data to then tell the story that you want to tell, right? Proof
Right.
to tell the story that you want to tell to the next person that you're selling to.
Yes.
The other storytelling gap that I heard in there was it's a way of effectively capturing the stories of your audience. Like how did I experience this? What was useful to me? How did I feel about it, in a way that might be more actually effective than some of the traditional ways we try to do that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because when we are sharing in that way or capturing in that way, we're getting that real time feed. What am I experiencing right now in the moment? Unfiltered from, I just had a lunch break, or I just went at another snack break. I just went to the restroom, came back, talked about it with my friend. And so now I have other opinions coming in that are maybe later on when I do the survey. It's not a snapshot of what was in that moment, but it's an aggregate of everything of my experience. And I have to remember what I was feeling in that moment. The ambient noise that we're talking about, that you brought up, there's other things like that. Like in the military, there's the PTSD, for example, and cases of combat related post-traumatic stress is not necessarily with combat, right? There are all these other things that can happen in the military that can cause PTSD. And there's training accidents, because we're always trained before we go fight. We train all the time. There's, the military is a microcosm of life. So there's sexual harassment, there's assaults, there are other forms of stress that happen, family stress, financial stress. All these things are going on. As my wife and I were stressed when we were in the military. Every Tuesday, living on the Presidio of San Francisco, I was an E4, not making hardly any money, right? In San Francisco, every Tuesday we were in the bread lines to get food so that we could, make it through the rest of the week. Every 2 weeks we go on Tuesdays to the kitchen. And that, those things that causes anxiety, causes stress. There are other narratives in sport, like Michael Jordan being from his high school basketball team. Well, that's really not the full narrative. The full narrative is, even though he didn't make the varsity team, he played JV, right? So he was getting better, just not on the varsity team. He wasn't cut from the whole squad.
Right.
So those things, and we're talking about startups. The garage startup theory is, yeah, some folks started in their garage, but they had huge capital to do that. I mean, what this was
to the garage through the little mail slot.
Right? It was that.
Yeah.
I mean, even Jeff Bezos had significant financial backing, in the garage, and then was quickly went to a store, like a regular friend. But we have these narratives we share that, oh yeah, it's in the garage. It was like a bootstrapping thing, and yeah,
Right.
we had a lot of financial backing to do some of that stuff. So I think we have to share those narratives and lessen the gap, so that we're having more, I think, a truth story come out.
Right. So in a sort of circuitous way, John, what I hear from this is we need to be conscious about the stories that we ourselves are including or not including, and get better and more intentional about that. We need to listen more, which is what we talked about last time, to the people around us, whether they're our audience or just less represented people in our communities, and pay attention more to the stories that are being tried to get out, that may be being blocked. And thirdly, we need to actively support new voices and new stories in joining the chorus.
Yes.
I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why you're the great improviser.
Listening for story.
Always listening for story. That is, yeah, spot on.
And I guess I would add one further thing, because I'm still listening in my head to that sort of random childhood story that I remembered, which is, I guess there's also something about courage to tell stories that we may not always, we're not sure how they're going to land, or they're not the stories that maybe feel like they'll be received the best or make us look the best. Like, as leaders, are we always telling stories about our successes? Are we telling stories about our failures, but really our failures, not the failures that we then overcame and looked great in the end, but like actually vulnerable stories? Are we doing that? And how are we creating an environment where other people can do that as well?
I love it. Cool.
Shall we play?
Yeah, let's play.
So we were having this conversation about data and storytelling with data. And so I prepared a little thing for us. These are a few slides that I've pulled from, have you heard of PowerPoint karaoke?
No, I don't think I have.
PowerPoint karaoke is there's a number of different brands of this, but the activity is to help people with presentation skills or spontaneity, or whatever muscle you're exercising. You just put up random slides, and people have to do a presentation on the spot with no planning. So I've pulled a couple of slides from PowerPoint karaoke decks, and here's what I thought we'd do. I'll put up a slide, and then you're going to tell me the story of that data.
Okay.
And then I'll do the same slide and tell a different story, because what we're talking about is that the data doesn't stand just on its own, but you need to really be clear about the story you're telling. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Awesome.
So let's see. Present slides. Here we go.
Awesome. I love this.
Am I allowed to
Oh,
share?
you know what? Let me see if I can do it. I can see if I can do it.
There you go. All right. There is your slide.
Okay, we have a slide that says salary is on is that the y-axis? Is that right?
Yep.
Salary is on the y-axis, and then height is on the x-axis, and there's a line with some going up in like a 45-degree angle. I'm explaining this for like folks that can't see it.
Yeah, sure.
And then there are some scatter dots on the on either side of the line as the line goes up. We're talking about the in this story how salaries are on the rise in our company. We have had a great third quarter last year, and the third quarter has really projected us and moved us where we have been hiring more individuals, and the salaries have been increasing. We've been able to get more equity on the board for making sure that everybody's pay is there. As we move down the x-axis, though, the height of our company, as we're moving higher and higher, we are having more market share, and that is causing us to dominate. What we need to be able to do, though, is continue that trajectory, because we know there might be a falling off of the line a little bit later. But because we are on the rise right now, we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue to press and not rest on what really has gotten us here. We have to think about, can we even break the model to get even more of a higher trajectory? That's it.
Wow. That was very inspiring. Thank you, John. All right, here's a totally different story from this slide. What this data show is that people who are taller are getting paid more. And as a vertically challenged person, I would like to say I think this is unfair, and we should not align our stories of leadership or quality with someone's physical stature. So as you'll see, this data proves that we have some inequality here in our organization, and we should have HR reassess everyone's compensation.
I think I see your dot on the bottom there.
It's right there at the bottom. It's that last dot.
It's the last dot right there.
It's that last dot. All right. You want to do one more? That's enough for now.
No, I think that's enough. I think people get the point.
They get the point.
Yeah, for sure. That's good. Very two different narratives. Very two different ways of seeing the same picture and having a different, story about that narrative.
Right.
And so then, as we're talking about story gaps, how do we close the gap between the story? What's the truth between the two of those?
Right.
Maybe that's like the next iteration of what's true between those two statements. Because that's the same line. It's the same. We are going up in profits and revenue, and we need to keep it. But taller people are getting the jobs, and
yes, both narratives can be true. The other thing that just struck me as you were saying that is, like, I put up that slide. If I have my experience with that data or my point of view, I might be like, I don't have to explain it. It's obvious.
It's obvious.
Look how unfair it is in our organization. We're aligning salary with height. And you're like, no. That is not what I got at all from that, or that's not what I see. So that's why this conscious storytelling as leaders becomes so important.
Yeah, very good. Nice. Love it. So tell us what is coming up for you as we are putting this on YouTube. So I want to make sure people know.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. The book, the Facilitation Advantage book, is now out. We are having a virtual book launch party on the 26th of July, Friday, the 26th of July, I think. Is that it? Yes. At 10 a.m. Eastern. So come join us for that. If you go to thefacilitationadvantage.com, you can buy the book and register for that event, or email us if that's not true and you can't find it. And I'm off to Prague to do the Applied Improv Network conference in Prague next week, and we'll be doing some workshops on the book as well there.
Fantastic. For me, I am having a webinar that's going to be on 5 principles of storytelling, and that's going to be coming up on next Thursday, on the think it's the 18th, I want to say that's right. And then the afternoon, the early evening time. So folks would get off work and just kind of come on in and have a great, just, learning five different things about how you can be a better storyteller in your job in work and things. And then the other thing is I'll be going on the 20th. I'll be following you, but not as far as Prague, but over to Tunis, Tunisia. And I'll be working with the company over there on disability. So it's this Disability Pride Month. And a lot of times as a person living with a disability, an amputee, I get asked to go around the globe to talk about how to build programs, the value, the insights from people with disabilities, and how we can have more structure of universal designs and include and make more people not just include in the conversation, but belong and know that they need to be a part of the conversation for increasing revenue. So that's what I'm going to be doing over in Tunis, Tunisia. Thank you to our U.S. ambassador over there for the invitation, and can't wait to get on the plane to go.
Amazing. Wish I could
Yeah,
be
it
one of those.
is.
Yeah.
It's cool. So thank you everybody for being in with us today. It's another great episode of Performance Shift. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and gained some valuable insight that you can apply to your own life and work. If you want to learn more about the power of transformation, how you can shift your own performance to achieve your goals and dreams, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, our LinkedIn Live, our Facebooks, and our YouTube channel, and join us for our next episode. And if you found this episode helpful, we'd love for you to leave us a review on your favorite social media where you listen to the show. Your feedback helps us to improve the show and reach more listeners like you. See you next episode, where we're going to talk more about the stories that we are telling ourselves and the stories we're telling others. And there's another one I want to share, but I can't remember it. So that's all right. Let's just go. We'll just make it happen. Thanks, Cap, for being on. It's always great to play with you. And we will see everybody later. Go forth, inspire your world.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye for now.